It was clear that the baby would be born soon. But there were some concerns in the village. "Yuli's tummy is very big," one of the neighbors said. "We just hope it's not twins. In Ogadi, twins are not allowed." In Ogadi, having twins was considered an abomination. People believed that twins brought bad luck. If someone gave birth to twins, both babies would be taken to the shrine to die, and the parents would have to go through a cleansing ceremony. It was a very serious matter, and no one in the village ever wished for it to happen. Once upon a time in a quiet village called Ogadi, there lived a hardworking farmer named Okachukwu. He was a man loved by his neighbors for his strength and kind heart. Okachukwu and his wife, Amaka, had longed for a child for many years. When Amaka finally became pregnant after many prayers and sacrifices, their home was filled with joy. But their happiness was about to be shaken in ways Okachukwu could never have imagined. One evening, Okachukwu returned from the farm, tired and eager to rest. The sun was setting and the village was quiet. Even the chickens were settling into their coops for the night. Okachukwu dropped his tools by the door and called out, "Amaka, I'm back." There was no response. Confused, he turned to Uli, Amaka's younger sister, who lived with them. "Uli, where is your sister?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Uli hesitated for a moment, then said, "Uncle, my sister fell sick this afternoon. She was stooling and vomiting too much. Uncle Chukwudi took her to Obudu's compound to see the herbalist." "What, my wife, Amaka, sick? How, when?" Okachukwu's voice trembled as he tried to understand what he was hearing. Yuli's eyes filled with worry. "Uncle, it happened suddenly. She was fine in the morning, but by midday she couldn't even stand. Uncle Chukwudi said we must act fast, so they left immediately." Okachukwu felt his heart drop. Amaka was 5 months pregnant. Pregnant after years of waiting and praying. They had been overjoyed when the pregnancy was confirmed. Now the thought of anything happening to her or the baby was unbearable. Without a second thought, Okachukwu dashed out of the house. His hunger and exhaustion were forgotten. "I must see her," he muttered under his breath, running towards Obudu's compound. Obudu was a well-known herbalist in Ogadi. People trusted him with their lives, and his compound was often filled with those seeking his help. As Okachukwu approached the compound, he saw his uncle Chukwudi sitting outside. Chukwidi's face was heavy with sorrow. "Uncle, where is my wife? Where is Amaka?" Okachukwu asked breathlessly. Chukwudi avoided his gaze. "Okachukwu, let's go inside. Obudu will explain everything," he said, his voice low. "No. You're my uncle. Tell me what's going on. I deserve to know." Okachukwu's voice rose with frustration. Chukwudi sighed deeply. He had hoped to shield Okachukwu from the painful truth for a little longer, but he could see there was no use hiding it. "All right, let's go to Obudu together. He will tell you everything." Inside the compound, Obudu met them at the door. His face was grave. He knew Okachukwu and Amaka well. They had visited him often during their struggles to conceive. "Okachukwu, be strong," Obudu began. "Where is my wife?" Okachukwu interrupted. "I want to see her now." Obudu sighed. "Be a man, Okachukwu. Amaka didn't make it. She passed away shortly after she arrived here." The words hit Okachukwu like a thunderbolt. "What? No. No, it can't be," he cried, falling to the ground. "God, why? What have I done to deserve this?" He wept bitterly, groaning and muttering to himself. Chukwudi knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Okachukwu, please, you have to be strong. Let's go see her." After what felt like an eternity, Okachukwu wiped his tears and stood up. "Take me to her," he said quietly. In the dimly lit room, Amaka lay lifeless. Okachukwu's tears flowed freely as he knelt beside her. "It's over," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Chukwudi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Leave everything to me. Let's go home and prepare for the burial." Together they left the herbalist's compound, carrying the weight of their loss back to a home that would never feel the same again. 2 years had passed since Okechukwu lost Amaka, but the pain of her death still felt fresh. He could not understand why life had been so cruel to him. For the entire first year after her passing, he wore black mourning clothes. He let his beard grow long and his hair remained uncut. He looked like someone from ancient times, carrying the weight of sorrow on his shoulders. When the 1-year mourning period ended, his friends and relatives began urging him to move on. "Okechukwu, life must go on," they would say. "You are still young and you need a wife to help you rebuild your life." But Okechukwu could not accept their words. "How can I stop mourning Amaka when my heart still bleeds for her?" he often wondered aloud. A year passed after the mourning period, and the pressure from his late wife's parents joined that of his friends. Amaka's father, Okonkwo, visited him several times. "Okechukwu, my son," Okonkwo said one evening, "it's time to take another wife. Life doesn't wait for anyone. Amaka would want you to be happy." But Okechukwu only sighed deeply and shook his head. "Papa, I hear you, but my heart is not ready. Amaka was my life and I feel like a part of me died with her." Even as 5 years passed, Okechukwu still struggled to open his heart to the idea of marriage. But the pressures became unbearable. Everywhere he went, people whispered. Finally, one day he made a decision. Sitting alone in his hut, he thought aloud, "Because of the love I had for Amaka and her family, I will ask for her sister Yuli's hand in marriage. This will honor Amaka's memory and keep the bond between our families strong. The love I could not give Amaka will now be showered on her sister." He shared his thoughts with his uncle Chukwudi and other relatives. Some were shocked. "Okechukwu, have you thought about this carefully?" one elder asked. "The death of your wife during pregnancy might be a curse. Marrying from the same family could bring bad luck." But Chukwudi dismissed their fears. "There's no curse," he said firmly. "If Okonkwo and his family agree, there's nothing to worry about. Love is what matters." After much discussion, most of Okechukwu's relatives agreed that the marriage was not abnormal. They cited examples from neighboring villages where similar marriages had taken place. "Tradition allows this," Chukwudi said. "If Okonkwo agrees, we will proceed." On an Afur market day, Okechukwu prepared 2 kegs of palm wine as directed by his family. That evening he set out with Chukwudi and 2 other uncles to visit Okonkwo. They carried the wine carefully, knowing it was a significant gesture. When they arrived at Okonkwo's compound, he welcomed them warmly. "Ah, my in-laws, you are welcome," he said, shaking their hands. "What brings you here today?" Chukwudi smiled and said, "Okonkwo, we came to discuss something with you. But first let us sit and drink." Okonkwo nodded, and his wife brought out kola nuts and cups for the palm wine. As they ate and drank, the atmosphere remained light, but Okonkwo could sense that the visit had a serious purpose. "We thank you, Okonkwo," Chukwudi said. "You have always been a good father to us. Today we have come with an important matter to discuss." Okonkwo looked curious. "An important matter? Tell me more," he said. Okechukwu's heart pounded as he prepared to speak. He knew this conversation could change his life forever. "My in-law," Chukwudi began, his voice steady and respectful. "Any road that a person has passed once, if it is good, they will pass it again. People say that proverbs are the oil with which words are eaten." He paused, watching Okonkwo's reaction carefully before continuing. "My nephew, who is also your son-in-law, Okechukwu, wishes to strengthen his relationship with your family. For this reason, he is humbly asking for the hand of your daughter, Uli, in marriage." Okonkwo leaned back and chuckled, his laughter filling the room. He laughed so much that Chukwudi and the elders exchanged curious glances, wondering what was on his mind. Finally, Okonkwo stopped laughing and looked at them with a smile. "My in-laws," Okonkwo said, his voice steady but kind, "your mission is a good one. However, this task you speak of is not so easy. As for me, I must consult widely. And even after that, the decision will not be mine alone. My daughter Uli must also make her own choice. I cannot give you an answer right away. Let us keep our fingers crossed and see how things unfold." Chukwudi smiled, feeling relieved. The words of Okonkwo were promising, even if they were not a direct yes. "Thank you, my in-law," Chukwudi replied. "We are grateful for your understanding and willingness to consider our request." The men stood up to take their leave, and Chukwudi thanked Okonkwo once more. As they walked home, one of the elders spoke up. "Does anyone need the wisdom of the gods to know that Okonkwo has already given his consent? His words were clear, he approves of the marriage. All we need to do now is prepare for the traditional ceremony." Chukwudi nodded, feeling hopeful. He glanced at Okechukwu, whose silence was unusual. Okechukwu said nothing but silently prayed that everything would go well. In his heart he believed the journey was a successful one. Chukwudi, on the other hand, was thrilled. Okechukwu's troubles over the years had been a heavy burden on him. For so long he had prayed for Okechukwu to find happiness, and this proposal felt like the beginning of something good. Uli, Amaka's younger sister, was now a young woman. She had been only 10 years old when Amaka married Okechukwu. She had lived with them as a child, and Okechukwu had always been like a father to her. When she heard about Okechukwu's proposal, she was stunned. "How can I marry him?" she said to her mother one evening. "He is like a father to me. This is strange." Her mother, however, was supportive. "Uli, this is not strange. It happens. Think of it as a way to honor your sister's memory and keep our families close." Weeks later, after all the consultations, the marriage plans were concluded. The traditional marriage ceremony took place, and it was a colorful and joyful event. The process had been demanding, but Okechukwu was glad he was able to overcome every challenge. On the evening of the next Nkwo market day, Okechukwu invited his friends and family for a small gathering. It was his way of appreciating everyone who had supported him during the marriage process. When everyone was seated, Okechukwu stood up to address the group. "Today is a remarkable day in my life," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "I can now forget the sorrows of the past. I thank you all for your support and encouragement. Without you, this journey would not have been possible. I salute you all." The women in the gathering immediately broke into a melodious traditional song. Okechukwu's aunt was the first to step forward and begin dancing, swaying gracefully to the rhythm. She was soon joined by other women, their movements filled with joy and energy. The men, seated in a corner, nodded their heads in rhythm with the music, echoing words of encouragement and approval. Before long, the entire gathering was on its feet, singing and dancing. In that moment, Okechukwu felt a deep sense of peace and happiness. He looked around at the smiling faces of his friends and family and knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. For the first time in years, his heart was light and his spirit was filled with hope. Okechukwu was a patient and understanding man. From the very beginning, he handled his new wife Uli with care and tenderness, treating her almost like a daughter. But Uli struggled to adjust to her new role as his wife. Their relationship had always been that of an uncle to a younger sister, and it wasn't easy for her to make the transition. "Uli," Okechukwu said one evening, sitting beside her on the couch, "I understand how you feel, but you must realize that things have changed. You are no longer just a helper in this house. You are my wife now." Uli nodded silently, her eyes cast down. "I know, but it's hard for me. Everything feels so strange. I don't know how to act or even what to say sometimes." Okechukwu smiled gently. "Take your time. I am here for you and we will figure it out together." It wasn't just the change in her role that troubled Uli. The memory of her late sister, Amaka, lingered in her heart. She couldn't bring herself to eat at the same table with Okechukwu or sit with him for long conversations. Going to bed with him felt nearly impossible. "I keep praying that this shyness will go away," Uli confessed one evening. "But Amaka's memory keeps coming back. It's like she's still here with us." Okachukwu nodded thoughtfully. That's understandable, Uli. After all, you and Amaka were very close. She raised you like her own child. Things became even harder when Okachukwu presented Uli with her late sister's clothes and jewelry. These belong to Amaka, he said gently. I thought you might like to have them. Uli accepted the items, but her hands trembled as she held them. Thank you, she said quietly, forcing a smile. But deep inside she felt uneasy. Wearing her sister's belongings seemed too painful. Every time she looked at the clothes or jewelry, they brought back memories of Amaka. That evening, Uli mustered the courage to speak to Okachukwu about something that had been bothering her. My husband, she began hesitantly, may I ask you for a favor? Of course, Uli, he replied. What is it? She pointed to the enlarged painting of Amaka hanging on the wall in the sitting room. Whenever I see that, it saddens me. It reminds me of my position in this house when she was alive. If it's not too much to ask, could you take it down for a while? Just until I get used to everything. Okachukwu looked at her with understanding in his eyes. Uli, I never want to hurt you or make you uncomfortable. If removing it will help you feel better, I will take it down immediately. True to his word, Okachukwu removed the painting that night. He also stored away other items that might remind Uli of her sister. I loved Amaka deeply, he told himself, and because of that love I chose Uli. Whatever it takes to make her happy, I will do it. It is my promise. Uli was touched by his kindness. Thank you for understanding, she said softly. It means a lot to me. Over time, Uli began to feel more comfortable in her new home. She appreciated Okachukwu's patience and love. His actions showed her that she had truly found favor with him. Okachukwu, on his part, was glad to have someone to share his life with again. He no longer had to cook for himself or manage the house alone. His joy slowly returned, and he thanked God for bringing Uli into his life. May the stormy days of my life remain in the past, he prayed one evening. I am grateful for the people who supported me through those hard times, and I pray that I never face such trials again. Though the journey wasn't easy, Okachukwu and Uli were beginning to find peace and happiness together. Okachukwu was full of joy. It had been barely 6 months since he married Uli, and now she was pregnant. He could hardly believe it. The news of expecting a baby filled him with happiness. He smiled to himself as he thought about how much his life had changed for the better. He walked to the corner of the room where he had stored the baby items from his first marriage. Let me see what I have, he muttered to himself. He opened the box carefully. Inside, everything was intact, just as it had been when he had put them away. The clothes, the baby blankets, the small shoes, all were in perfect condition. Everything is here, he said with a smile. I just need to buy a few more things to be fully ready. He couldn't wait to welcome the baby into their home. On the weekend, Uli decided to visit her mother in Umuram village for some advice. It was important to her because she knew she could talk to her mother more openly than anyone else. Uli packed a small bag and got ready to leave. Uli, remember to give my message to Papa, her husband reminded her as he hugged her goodbye. I will, don't worry, Uli replied, trying to hide her excitement. Uli's mother, Lolo Adago, had raised 5 children and knew everything there was to know about pregnancy and childbirth. When Uli arrived at her mother's home, Lolo Adago wasted no time in sitting down to speak with her daughter. They talked for hours about the do's and don'ts of pregnancy. Uli, you need to rest more. Don't overwork yourself and make sure you eat well. It's very important for the baby, Lolo Adago said, looking at her daughter with love. I will, Mama, Uli promised, listening carefully to every word her mother said. She loved her mother dearly and always felt more comfortable around her than anyone else. Lolo Adago also gave her advice on how to prepare for the baby's arrival. Your body is going through a lot of changes, but you are strong. Trust me, you will do great. Uli smiled gratefully, feeling more at ease with her mother's words. By the end of their conversation, Uli wished that her mother could stay with her all the time to offer her guidance. But Lolo Adago promised she would visit often. Now remember to give Okechukwu the message I have for him, Lolo Adago said, reminding her daughter again. Uli nodded, promising to pass on her mother's words. As she prepared to leave, her mother handed her a bag filled with things for her and the baby. These are for you and my grandchild. Use them well. Uli thanked her mother and hugged her tightly. It was hard to leave, but she knew she had to go back to her husband. When Uli returned home, Okechukwu greeted her warmly. He had been doing most of the housework while she was away. He didn't want her to overwork herself while pregnant. I missed you, Uli, Okechukwu said with a smile, giving her a kiss on the cheek. Did you get everything you needed from your mother? Yes, Okechukwu. Mama gave me a lot of advice and she even gave me things for the baby, Uli replied, feeling thankful. Okechukwu smiled. I'm so glad. We are both excited about the baby's arrival. Everything is going well. Uli's belly was growing bigger every day. It was clear that the baby would be born soon. But there were some concerns in the village. Uli's tummy is very big, one of the neighbors said. We just hope it's not twins. In Ogadi, twins are not allowed. In Ogadi, having twins was considered an abomination. People believed that twins brought bad luck. If someone gave birth to twins, both babies would be taken to the shrine to die, and the parents would have to go through a cleansing ceremony. It was a very serious matter, and no one in the village ever wished for it to happen. Meanwhile, Lolo Adago began preparing to stay with Uli until her delivery. She bought clothes, food, and baby items, then traveled to Ogadi. When she arrived, she noticed Uli's large belly and grew concerned. Uli, your tummy looks very big, she said. Both Okechukwu and Uli's family also hoped that she wouldn't have twins, but they remained optimistic and prayed for a safe and smooth delivery. Everyone in the house eagerly awaited the birth of the baby, hoping that all would go well. On Nkwo market day, Uli couldn't stay still. She walked around restlessly, her face tight with discomfort. Her mother knew that labor had set in. Okechukwu, it's time, she whispered. Okechukwu jumped to his feet. Let's go to Ojugo's clinic now, he exclaimed, helping Uli to the door. They had been preparing for this day and everything was ready. Ojugo, the village's most trusted traditional midwife, welcomed them warmly. She had earned a reputation for her skill and care. For over 10 years since inheriting her practice from her parents, Ojugo had handled countless deliveries with almost no casualties. Don't worry, Okechukwu, Ojugo reassured him. Uli is in good hands. Okechukwu nodded, though he was nervous. Please take care of her, Ojugo, he said before stepping outside to wait. As the hours passed, Okechukwu paced up and down the compound. Inside, Uli groaned and cried out in pain. Ojugo worked tirelessly, encouraging Uli every step of the way. Push, Uli. You're almost there, Ojugo said, holding her hand. By evening, with Ojugo's expert guidance, Uli gave birth to 2 healthy baby boys. Twins. Ojugo gasped, her voice tinged with fear. Ojugo froze for a moment. Twins were an abomination in Ogadi village. This was a serious problem. But she quickly regained her composure and completed the delivery. As she cleaned the babies, she turned to Uli, who was exhausted but smiling faintly. You did well, Uli. Rest now. Outside, Okechukwu was growing impatient. Ojugo finally came out. Your wife has delivered safely, she said. Okechukwu let out a loud cheer. Thank the gods. My wife and baby are safe. He ran around shouting the good news to everyone nearby. Lolo Adago, Uli's mother, went straight to Ojugo. What did she have? A boy or a girl? She asked. Ojugo hesitated. You should see for yourself, she said, leading Lolo Adago into the labor room. When Lolo Adago saw the twins, her face fell. She turned to Ojugo, her voice trembling. This is a big problem. You know what twins mean in Ogadi. Ojugo nodded solemnly. What do we do? Should we inform Okechukwu now? Yes, Lolo Adago said firmly. This is his decision to make. Okechukwu was still outside, dancing and telling everyone the good news. A small crowd had gathered, curious about the birth. "It's a good day. My wife is fine and my child is here," he shouted. Ojugo called him inside. "Okechukwu, come quickly," she said. When Okechukwu entered the labor room and saw the twins, his joy turned to despair. He slumped against the wall, covering his face with his hands. "Twins," he whispered. Ojugo explained the options. "You must either sacrifice the twins to the gods and go through purification with Uli, or, you know what happens if you keep them. The gods will not be pleased." Okechukwu shook his head. "I can't do it. I can't harm my children. There has to be another way." The sun was setting and the crowd outside grew restless. "Why is it taking so long? What's going on in there?" someone whispered. Okechukwu turned to Ojugo. "Please go and tell the people everything is fine. Say I'll be out soon with my child." Ojugo hesitated but agreed. She stepped outside to address the crowd. Meanwhile, Okechukwu bolted the front door and hurried to the back room. "Uli, Lolo, we're leaving now," he said, grabbing a cloth to wrap the twins. "What? Where are we going?" Uli asked weakly. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "We can't stay here. I won't let anything happen to our boys." Quickly, Okechukwu guided Uli, the twins, and Lolo Adago out through the back door. They disappeared into the night, leaving the clinic and the village behind. When Ojugo realized what had happened, she felt a deep fear in her heart. Okechukwu's escape with his family meant one thing. An abomination had occurred under her roof. Without wasting time, she went straight to the spiritual heads of Ogadi village to report the matter. The spiritual mediators arrived swiftly and ordered Ojugo to bring the necessary items for cleansing. Goats, fowls, eggs, alligator pepper, kola nuts, palm wine, dry gin, money, and a black cloth were gathered. They examined the items carefully, nodding their heads in approval. "It is enough," one of the mediators declared. "Let us begin." They began the cleansing ritual with chants and prayers to appease the gods. Ojugo watched anxiously as the mediators carried out the rites. When they finished, one of them turned to her. "You are cleansed, but the family of Okechukwu is cursed. Their actions have provoked the gods," he said solemnly. News of the abomination spread quickly through the village. People gathered in groups, whispering and pointing fingers. "I knew this would happen," Okechukwu's uncles lamented, shaking their head. "We warned him against marrying Uli, but he didn't listen. Now he has brought a curse upon us all." Chikwudi called his brothers for a meeting. "We cannot ignore this problem. We must find a solution before the gods turn their anger on the rest of the family," he said. He prepared the required items and invited the spiritual mediators again. When they arrived, they made their decision final. "Okechukwu and his family are banished forever," one of them announced. "Their legs will never touch the soil of Ogadi again. We have severed all ties with them. There will be no further communication of any kind. This is the voice of the gods." Chikwudi, though heartbroken, accepted the verdict. He knew there was nothing more to be done. "The gods have spoken," he murmured, tears welling in his eyes. Meanwhile, Okechukwu was in a state of mental agony as he made his way out of Ogadi with his wife, Lolo, and their newborn twins. Uli, weak and in pain from childbirth, leaned heavily on him. "Uli, hold on," Okechukwu said gently, his voice filled with concern. "We will soon be safe." The journey was long and difficult. As they walked, Okechukwu's thoughts were filled with pain and anger. "How can they expect me to sacrifice my children?" he muttered bitterly. "What is their offense? They are innocent before God. I will never let that happen. God forbid." They finally arrived in Umurum, Uli's village. Unlike Ogadi, Umurum was not bound by such harsh traditions. Okonkwo welcomed them warmly. "You are safe here," Okonkwo said, placing a reassuring hand on Okechukwu's shoulder. Okechukwu nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Okonkwo. You don't know what this means to us." Okonkwo quickly called a meeting with the elders and youths of the village. When Okechukwu shared his story, the youths became angry. "This is wickedness," one of them exclaimed. "Why does Ogadi still hold on to such backward traditions?" "Calm down," one of the elders said. "We cannot change the people of Ogadi, but we can help Okechukwu and his family." The elders decided to give Okechukwu full status as an indigene of Umurum. They also pledged to help him build a home so he could start afresh. "Thank you all," Okechukwu said with tears in his eyes. "Your kindness will never be forgotten." With the support of his in-laws, Okechukwu's mind began to heal from the trauma of leaving Ogadi. He arranged a naming ceremony for his twins. "The first will be named Osandu, meaning run of survival," he said proudly. "The second will be called Ebibe, meaning miracle of God." The twins were identical in every way. Only Okechukwu and Uli could tell them apart. And so, Okechukwu began a new life in Umurum, leaving the pain and curse of Ogadi behind. Every year, Okechukwu received a portion of land in Umurum village to farm, just like every other member of Okonkwo's larger family. He worked hard on the land, determined to provide for his family. Okechukwu tried his best to forget the painful memories of Ogadi. His greatest comfort was his twins Osandu and Ebibe. "My prayer," he often said to Uli, "is that these children will grow up to wipe away our tears and bring us joy." Uli adjusted easily to life in Umurum. After all, it was her birthplace. Her parents and relatives were nearby, and she felt she hadn't lost much by leaving Ogadi. She busied herself with petty trading, housework, and raising her children. 2 years later, Osandu and Ebibe reached school age. Their parents enrolled them in the primary school in Umurum village. From the start, the twins charmed everyone with their handsomeness and friendly nature. At school, their classmates were drawn to them. Osandu and Ebibe did everything together, and even their teachers sometimes struggled to tell them apart. "Who is Osandu and who is Ebibe?" their teacher, Madam Uju, asked one day. The twins laughed, and their classmates replied, "Just call them, and whoever answers is the one you're talking to." Their friends at school took this approach too. They didn't bother trying to figure out who was who. They simply called their names and let the twins respond. At home, the boys were well-behaved and helpful. Uli taught them how to do basic chores like sweeping, fetching water, and washing clothes. She also emphasized the importance of greeting elders. "Always show respect," she told them. "It will take you far in life." "Yes, Mama," they would reply in unison, eager to learn. The twins quickly learned to carry out their duties responsibly. If they forgot something, they apologized immediately when reminded. Uli was so proud of them. When Uli had her fourth child, she didn't feel the need to hire a maid. "Osandu and Ebibe are my little helpers," she told Okechukwu with a smile. Her husband agreed. "They're growing into fine boys," he said, patting their heads. Uli's joy often brought tears to her eyes. Osandu and Ebibe should have been dead long ago, she thought, but God saved them. "They are my pride, my firstborns, the children who made me a mother." One day, she looked at Okechukwu with gratitude. "My love for you will never fade," she said. "You acted so fast when it mattered most." The couple agreed never to reveal the twins' history to them too early in life. As the twins grew, their intelligence shone. They excelled in school and became favorites among their teachers. "Your boys are doing very well," Madam Uju told Uli one afternoon. "They are not only smart but also respectful." The twins also had a natural talent for sports, particularly the relay race. By the time they were 12, they were representing their school in competitions. They had already won prizes like books, cups, and medals. At a recent competition organized by the local education authority, the twins performed exceptionally well. The sports director, Mr. Emeka, noticed their talent and approached them. "Well done, boys," he said, shaking their hands. "You two have impressive track records. Tell me, who are your parents?" Osandu stepped forward confidently. "We are the children of Motsi Okechukwu, a farmer from Umurum village. Our mother is a petty trader." Mr. Emeka nodded, impressed. "Tell your parents I will make time to visit them," he said, patting the twins on their shoulders. The twins beamed with pride. "Thank you, sir," they said. As they walked home, they couldn't hide their excitement. "Mama and Papa will be so happy," Ebibe exclaimed. Their parents were indeed proud, knowing their boys were growing into remarkable young men. Osandu and Ebibe were excelling not only in their studies but also in sports. By the time they were about to complete secondary school, it was clear they wanted to pursue careers in athletics. Their parents, Okechukwu and Uli, fully supported their decision. "Your future is in your hands," Okechukwu told them one evening. "Whatever you choose to do, do it well and always make us proud." The twins trained harder than ever and were soon selected by the National Sports Council to represent Nigeria at a continental championship in Egypt. The competition, open to athletes from all African countries, was their first big outing. The stakes were high. This event would decide if they would move from amateur status to professional athletes. When the competition began, Osandu and Ebibe gave it their all. They each won gold medals, narrowly defeating their opponents. Nigeria came second overall, with Egypt taking first place. The news of their victory spread like wildfire back home. Okechukwu was deeply focused on his farm work. The farming season had begun and there was no room for distractions. As he worked tirelessly under the sun, his mind was at peace. He was confident that his twin sons Osandu and Ebibe would return victorious from the sports championship. They had never failed to make him proud, and this time he was even more optimistic because of the extra effort they had put into their training. Returning home in the evening, tired and dusty, Okechukwu was taken aback by the scene at his compound. The place was filled with people. "What is going on here?" he muttered to himself, dropping his farm tools. His heart raced as he looked around. "Nobody was sick when I left this morning," he thought, his mind running wild with worry. "I didn't plan any ceremony. What could this crowd mean?" Before his fears could overwhelm him, he noticed the wide smiles on everyone's faces. His wife Uli ran out to meet him, her face glowing with joy. "My husband, they did it!" she exclaimed, almost jumping in excitement. "Our sons won the championship. Osandu and Ebibe brought us victory." Okechukwu's tense face softened and a smile crept across his lips. "They won?" he asked, as if needing confirmation. "Yes, they did," Uli replied, her voice filled with pride. As Okechukwu entered the compound, the crowd cheered. Friends and neighbors clapped him on the back, congratulating him on his son's success. Gifts of food, drinks, and even livestock were brought in celebration. Yuli's heart was full of gratitude as she watched the celebration unfold. She wiped tears from her eyes, recalling the day her twins were born. "The stone the builders rejected," she whispered to herself, "has become the cornerstone." Okechukwu noticed her tears and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Why are you crying, my wife?" he asked softly. "They are tears of joy," Uli replied, smiling through her tears. "I'm just remembering how far we've come. Our boys are truly a blessing." By the time Osandu and Ebibe returned home, they were not just sons. They were heroes. At the age of 21, they had achieved what most could only dream of. Their success brought honor not just to their family but to the entire village of Umuram. "Papa, we are back," Osandu called out as he and his brother entered the compound, carrying bags filled with gifts. "Welcome, my sons," Okechukwu said, his voice filled with pride. Ebibe smiled and handed his father an envelope. "This is for you and Mama. No more farming for you, Papa. We want you to rest now." Okechukwu chuckled. "So you want to make me lazy, eh?" "No, Papa," Osandu replied. "We just want you and Mama to enjoy the fruits of your labor." The twins had brought money, clothes, and all sorts of material gifts. They insisted that their parents should never lack anything again. Okechukwu, true to his generous nature, didn't keep the blessings to himself. He made sure to share the gifts with those who had supported him during his difficult times. especially his in-laws, the Okonkwo's. As the evening wore on, the compound buzzed with laughter, music, and celebration. Okechukwu looked around at his family and friends, his heart full of gratitude. "Thank you, God," he whispered. "You have truly blessed us." Okechukwu had been thinking deeply for days. He knew it was time to tell his children the truth about their origins. One evening, after finishing his meal, he turned to his wife, Uli, and spoke with a heavy heart. "Uli, Osandu, and Ebibe are no longer children," he began. "They are old enough to know their story, to understand where they come from. It is better they hear it from us than from outsiders." Uli sighed and looked at her husband. "If you think it's the right time, I have no objection," she said softly. "But I would have preferred we let sleeping dogs lie. Still, I trust your wisdom." Okechukwu nodded. "The truth must come out, my wife. They deserve to know." That night, when the world was quiet and intruders were unlikely, Okechukwu woke up his family. Only the youngest child, who was not yet 10 years old, remained asleep. The rest gathered in the living room, rubbing their sleepy eyes and wondering why they had been summoned. "My children," Okechukwu began, "I have a story to tell you, one that I have kept hidden for years. It is about our family and the trials we faced." The twins, Osandu and Ebibe, exchanged glances, sensing the seriousness in their father's tone. Okechukwu took a deep breath and started from the beginning. He spoke of his first marriage, the heartbreak that followed, and how the traditions of Ogadi village labeled his twins as outcasts. He explained how he and their mother, Uli, were forced into exile and how they found refuge in Umurum. "Your lives were in danger from the moment you were born," Okechukwu said, his voice trembling. "But God was with us. He gave us strength, and with the help of your mother's parents and the people of Umurum, we survived." As he spoke, Uli wiped tears from her eyes, and the twins sat in stunned silence. When their father finished, the room fell quiet for a moment. Then Osandu broke the silence. "Papa," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you went through all of this for us?" "Yes, my son," Okechukwu replied. "And I would do it all over again to keep you safe." Ebibe couldn't hold back his tears. "Mama, Papa, thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving us." The family burst into tears except for Okechukwu, who remained strong. "There's no need for tears," he said firmly. "We have survived, and look at how far we've come. You have brought honor to this family." The twins wiped their eyes and nodded. "We are proud of you, Papa," Osandu said, "and we will always be grateful." Before sending everyone back to bed, Okechukwu added, "One day you may want to visit Ogadi village and see your roots. But do it with proper planning." The twins agreed but were determined not to let the revelation affect their careers. "It's just an accident of birth," Ebibe said. "If we had been born elsewhere, none of this would have happened." Their success only grew with time. As their influence and wealth increased, they decided to give back to the community. "Education is the key," Osandu said one day. "Ogadi village needs awareness, and that will come through schooling." Together, the twins started an annual scholarship program for their old college, with special focus on students from Ogadi and Umurum. They worked closely with the school principal. "Please, principal," Ebibe insisted, "do not reveal our names to the public or the students. We want the scholarship to speak for itself." The principal agreed, and the program began to transform lives. Many students, especially those from Ogadi village, completed their education and secured good jobs in the cities. In another effort, the twins partnered with church missionaries to introduce God's word to Ogadi village. "With education and faith, the old, harmful traditions will disappear," Osandu explained. Over the years, the impact of their work became evident. People from Ogadi who moved to the cities began to see life differently. They realized the harm caused by their outdated customs and yearned for change. The twins' efforts were bearing fruit. Their story was no longer just one of pain and exile. It was a story of hope and transformation. Chukwudi was deeply pleased as he sat quietly at the village square. He watched the youth actively participate in the seminar, voicing their concerns about the harmful tradition that had plagued Ogadi village for generations. For years, Chukwudi had fought this battle alone, speaking against the killing of twins, but his voice had often fallen on deaf ears. Now, seeing the youth rise with determination filled him with hope. As the seminar ended, the leader of the elders stood up to address the gathering. "Tomorrow we shall meet at my compound to deliberate further," he announced. Chukwudi noticed a restless energy among the youth. Their faces were set with resolve, and he feared that things might turn violent if decisions were not made quickly. That evening, Chukwudi sat outside his hut, pondering the events of the day. "The youth are ready for change," he muttered to himself. "But will the elders listen?" As if fate was testing the village, the same night, Amadi's wife gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. News of the twin births spread like wildfire. This was the third pregnancy for Amadi's wife. With a heavy heart, Amadi knew he had no choice but to report the matter to the elders. The next morning, the elders gathered at Amadi's compound. There was no celebration, no joy, only silence and tension. Amadi stood before them, his face lined with worry. "Elders, these are my children," he said, pointing to the tiny babies wrapped in cloth. "A boy and a girl. They are innocent. I beg you to spare them." The elders looked at one another, each spitting on the ground in disapproval. The leader finally spoke. "Amadi, you know our tradition," he said gravely. "The gods do not allow twins to live in Ogadi. But the youth, they are restless. If we order the death of these children, they may rebel. And if we let them live, the gods may punish the village. We are at a crossroads." The leader paused and then added, "The mother has been separated from the twins until we decide their fate. Elders, we must act wisely." For a moment no one spoke. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Then Chukwudi cleared his throat and stood up. "Elders," he began, "shall we continue to live like our fathers? The youth have spoken. They want change, and I believe they are right. It is the dream of every good father for his children to be wiser and better than him. If we truly want progress, we must set aside some of our harmful traditions." The elders turned to look at him. "Foremost among these traditions," Chukwudi continued, "is the killing of twins. We are murdering our own flesh and blood, our own children. This is not the way. Let us find another way to appease the gods. Let us stop this act of murder." One elder who had been silent finally muttered, "Chukwudi, you have spoken well." After much deliberation, the elders reached a decision. The leader announced, "Amadi and his wife must provide black goats, a fowl, eggs, kola nuts, palm wine, and other minor items for purification before the shrine. The twins will be spared, but if the gods are angry, let them take the children's lives themselves." Amadi fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, elders. Thank you for sparing my children," he cried. He wasted no time fulfilling the requirements. The sacrifice was simple compared to the relief he felt knowing his twins were safe. Chukwudi watched it all with a heart full of joy. As the meeting ended, he thought to himself, "This is the beginning of change." He was confident that the gods would not harm anyone since the elders had spoken in one voice. With renewed determination, Chukwudi decided it was time to reconnect with his nephew Okechukwu and his family. "Over 2 decades have passed," he murmured. "It is time to bring them back home." Osandu and Ebibe had just returned from another sports competition, holding their trophies high with pride. They had once again made their family proud. Their parents, Okechukwu and Uli, were overjoyed. "You two never cease to amaze me," Uli said, her face glowing with happiness. "Another feather to your cap." "Thank you, Mama," Ebibe replied with a wide smile. "We worked hard for this one." As they celebrated, Osanda suddenly noticed an old man with gray hair walking slowly toward their compound. "Who could that be?" he asked, pointing. Uli squinted, trying to make out the figure. "I don't know," she replied. "He's coming this way." The old man was none other than Chukwudi, but neither Okechukwu nor Chukwudi recognized each other at first. Chukwudi had stopped by Okonkwo's compound, hoping for directions. "Good day," he greeted Okonkwo. "I am looking for Okechukwu's house. I believe this is the area." "Yes, it is," Okonkwo replied, studying Chukwidi's face. He couldn't recognize him either. "Go straight, then turn left. His house is the second one on the right." Chukwudi thanked him and made his way to Okechukwu's compound. When he arrived, he hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to introduce himself. He didn't want to cause a scene. Okechukwu stepped forward, eyeing the stranger curiously. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" Chukwudi remained silent for a moment, then finally said, "Okechukwu, is it really you?" Hearing the familiar voice, Okechukwu gasped. "Chukwudi, Uncle Chukwudi." "Yes, it is I," Chukwudi said, his voice trembling. Without another word, Okechukwu shouted with joy and rushed to embrace him. They hugged tightly, both of them weeping openly. "It has been so long," Okechukwu said, tears streaming down his face. "Too long," Chukwudi replied, his voice breaking. Uli and the children stood watching the emotional reunion, their faces filled with surprise. "Who is he, Mama?" Bondu asked. "That's your uncle," Uli explained. "He's your father's senior uncle, the one we've told you about." "Wonderful!" Osandu and Ebibe shouted together, clapping their hands. "At last we get to meet him." Chukwudi sat down, finally able to catch his breath. He looked at Osandu and Ebibe with admiration. "So these are the famous twins I've heard so much about," he said, smiling. "Yes, uncle," Okechukwu replied proudly. "They've made us proud in so many ways." The twins bombarded Chukwudi with questions. "Uncle, where have you been all these years?" Bondu asked. "Uncle, do you know the stories Papa told us about you?" Ebibe added excitedly. Chukwudi laughed, wiping his tears. "One at a time, my children. I will tell you everything. But first let me say how happy I am to see you all. Even if death takes me now, I will have no regrets." Meanwhile, in Ogadi village, the youths celebrated the elders' decision to spare Amadi's twins. They sent a delegation to the elders, bearing gifts to show their gratitude. "Thank you for listening to us," the leader of the youth said. "This is a new beginning for Ogadi." Though the killing of twins had not been officially abolished, everyone understood that Amadi's case had set a new precedent. No one would dare harm twins now, knowing they could reference Amadi's victory. The following year, the annual gathering of Ogadi's youth took on a special meaning. They had learned that Osandu and Ebibe, the famous stars who had brought honor to their family and supported scholarships in the village, were outcasts from Ogadi. The realization filled them with guilt. "These heroes are our brothers," one youth said during the meeting. "Yet they live in exile. We must bring them back." The youth sent an emissary to Okechukwu's family, pleading with them to attend the gathering. "We have wronged you," the emissary said humbly. "But Ogadi is ready to welcome you back with open arms." Okechukwu and Uli did not give an immediate answer. They wanted to be sure it was safe. "Let us make inquiries first," Okechukwu said to Uli later that evening. "We cannot take any chances." After consulting trusted sources, they were convinced that the village truly wanted their return. "It seems the seeds we planted have finally borne fruit," Okechukwu said with a smile. For the children, Ogadi was a strange and distant place. "Is this where we come from, Papa?" Bondu asked. "Yes, my son," Okechukwu replied. "And soon you will see it with your own eyes." The village square of Ogadi was alive with excitement. Bright decorations hung from trees, and the air was filled with the sound of drums and flutes. Traditional dance groups performed energetically, while colorful masquerades entertained the crowd. The people of Ogadi eagerly awaited the arrival of Okechukwu and his family, who had been invited as special guests. Suddenly, the sound of an engine announced their arrival. A large, intimidating jeep, surrounded by a convoy of security men, rolled into the square. The entire crowd stood up, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the visitors. "They've arrived," someone shouted. Okechukwu and his family stepped out, looking elegant and confident. Most of the elders recognized Okechukwu and his wife, Uli, but the children, Osandu and Ebibe, were strangers to them. "Are those the twins?" an elder whispered, his eyes wide with amazement. "Yes," another replied, nodding. "The same twins we once called outcasts." Chukwudi tried to push through the crowd to reach them, but it was impossible. The square was packed and the excitement was overwhelming. To honor the twins, the village released 21 cannon shots into the air. The thunderous noise echoed across the land, a sign of great respect. "Imagine this," one elder said, shaking his head. "The very people we rejected are now heroes." Osandu and Ebibe were filled with emotion. "At last we found our home," Osandu said softly, looking around. The youth leader stepped forward and raised his hands to quiet the crowd. "We welcome Okechukwu and his family back to Ogadi," he announced. "Today is a day of joy and celebration." The twins were invited to speak. Standing tall and confident, Osandu began. "We are deeply grateful for the warm reception you've given us. It means so much to finally be here among our people." Ebibe continued, "We also have some good news to share. First, we have decided to establish a college here in Ogadi. The college will open by this time next year. This is just the beginning of many projects we have planned for this village." The crowd erupted in applause. "A college in Ogadi?" someone exclaimed. "This is unbelievable." Osandu raised his hand to calm the noise. "What is a taboo today may not be tomorrow. We are happy to be part of you now and want to make our impact felt in this community." Before leaving, the twins arranged a meeting with the youth leaders and elders to discuss the details of their projects. Okechukwu also spoke, thanking the people for the honor given to his family. "This is a new beginning for us all," he said. As the family left, the elders sat together, reflecting on the day. "The gods we once feared were wrong," one elder admitted. "How could we have rejected such treasures? It's time to officially end this cruel tradition," another added. They unanimously agreed to abolish the killing of twins in Ogadi forever. Later, Okechukwu spoke to his children. "Osandu Ebibe," he began, "I have one request. Now that the battle is over, I want us to return to Ogadi permanently. I don't want my bones buried in a foreign land." The twins nodded. "We will make it happen, Papa," Ebibe promised. They began work immediately. The large compound Okechukwu had abandoned was overgrown and desolate, but it was enough space to accommodate new houses. As construction of the college progressed, the twins also started building their family homes in the compound. "It will be a place of pride," Osandu said as they reviewed the plans. When the college was completed, its commissioning ceremony was another grand occasion. Government officials, community leaders, and villagers gathered to celebrate. An official from the Ministry of Education gave a moving speech. "You are privileged to have a rare gem in the persons of Osandu and Ebibe," he said. "They are treasures that only come once in a generation." The following Nkwo market day, the twins also attended the commissioning of a second college in Umurum, where they had grown up. The event was equally grand, with people from all walks of life in attendance. In their speech, Osandu and Ebibe thanked the people of Umurum for their love and protection. "You stood by our family when others rejected us," Ebibe said. "We will never forget your kindness." Finally, they informed the people officially that in no time they would go home finally to their native land. "It is time to go home," Osandu said. "God has been faithful, and he has not allowed wicked traditions to destroy us." The crowd cheered, grateful to witness such a powerful testimony of resilience and forgiveness. This story reminds us that every person has value and that unity, understanding, and courage to challenge harmful practices can transform lives. The story also highlights the danger of blind adherence to outdated traditions. It teaches that true progress comes when we challenge unjust practices and embrace change. It also shows that those who are rejected or mistreated can rise above their circumstances and become agents of transformation, proving that kindness and perseverance can break barriers and heal communities. I love you all, and thank you for watching this amazing video. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed creating it. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share and comment on the lessons you have learned and let me know where you are watching from. See you in my next video. Bye.